Here we go. There you are. So welcome to our October Sharon Book Club, Read with Sharon Book Club. And this month we read Only
September,
Beautiful,
Sharon.
by
Sharon, it's September.
Oh, it's September. Oh my gosh. Thanks, Maria. I'm wishing. It's been a whirlwind. So yes, I'm sorry. Let's start again. It's our September book club pick, and we read Only the Beautiful by Susan Meissner, and Susan is on your screen there. Welcome, Susan. We are so glad to have you today joining us.
My pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me and reading my book.
We've had you a couple times now. This group of gals, and we don't have any guys that actually Zoom in. There's a bunch of them that are always bugging us saying, where's the new kit and when's the new book? But they never join us. I think we intimidate them or something. Avery knows she's always getting messages from a bunch of them. So there's that. But Susan, I first want to thank you for writing this. It was a tear-jerking tale with, it took me a while, took you a while to get to it, I know, which was this happy ending. But like I said, I was like, she's 17, but it was a very happy ending. And I think that there's that sort of that not knowing what happened to Rose, not happened to the end of the book. Really, because you didn't reveal that to the very last page, I think that helped us understand the same frustration that your characters did. And so I thought that was beautifully done. And what I'm finding is a lot of our COVID books have turned out to be some of the best writing many of us, I think, have done, because we weren't distracted by a lot of stuff. So I was going to first start off with that. This was a COVID book. So research, writing, just give us some thoughts on how that impacted the quality of this book and your writing and your inspiration.
Yeah, thanks so much. I entered the pandemic with this book. I had just started it. And so I was both grateful that I had it to work on, and yet it was also daunting too. I think I may not be the only one here who does creative work that found the pandemic and all the isolation kind of affected my creativity. I think maybe because there's a fear factor there, and none of us knew where the pandemic was headed and how bad it was going to be, and were we going to lose people we loved, and surely people did. So I think for all of those reasons, my creativity seemed to stagger a little bit. And I had to start this book several times. I had some false starts with it. And I think I have a great editor. She was able to help me kind of navigate the story that I really wanted to tell, but I just couldn't quite get my brain around. And she never told me, here's what you need to do. But she did say a couple of times, I don't think this is the story you want to tell. She was so right. So I think what finally gave me the clarity to write the book and have it be the way I wanted it to come out was realizing that it was Rosie's story first and foremost. And so I changed the point of view to her point of view, which is it's first person. So Rosie's telling you the story. It makes her a very vulnerable person at that point. It also, you're hearing this from the voice and heart of a 17-year-old, like you said. So it really brought it home that this was happening to young people, and what happened to Rosie happened to all kinds of people just like her. And so I think that the pandemic kind of it definitely had me drill down into the book because there was nothing else to do. But I had it affected me, the creativity part. I think I'm not sure, but I wonder if I would have lost my way so many times if it had been just an ordinary year.
I got cicadas are singing outside. They're making noise. Sorry. So my question, though, is when you said you started it several times, I noticed that in author's notes, you said that you had 2 full, complete drafts and rewrote them or made just major modifications. You said a point of view change. That's tough to do.
Exactly. That was a major full-on modification change. So the book was there, but it wasn't right. And so when I changed point of view, it meant going back to every single page and rewriting it so that it was just her voice. When you're writing first person, there really is there's no one else's mind that you can go into and exploit. It's just what Rosie sees, what she feels, what she experiences. So there was that. And then I had a whole section, I think 25,000 words of Amaryllis's story. And it was unnecessary. I wrote it, And maybe I had to write it to get my heart around Amaryllis's character. But there's 25,000 words about Amaryllis that never made it into the book.
Was
And
that
I
first
think,
person as well? Excuse me, was that first
yeah,
person
it
as well?
was.
Oh
Yeah.
my
And so
goodness.
I'm thinking like when the paperback comes out in the early part of 2024, I'm not sure I have a date on that. I think I'm going to release those chapters as a novella, not even a novella, 25,000 words, as a little tiny ebook that people can get that who have read the book, because there's some spoilers in there. You kind of almost need to have read the book to be able to appreciate the Amaryllis chapters, and also not to have your other experience spoiled. But I think I might just put those up for people.
Yeah, it's interesting. What motivated you to write this particular story? I mean, did you drive by the Sonoma, insane asylum, or as they called it, or is it you had someone in your family who was affected by it? I know you live out in that area, and I know that you and I both have sort of ties to that Sonoma, Napa area. So some thoughts on
Right.
that.
Yeah, actually, I was researching a completely different book when I stumbled upon a photograph. I was actually writing The Nature of Fragile Things, which I think we might have done with this book
We
group.
did. We have read that one.
Yeah.
Yes, lovely.
Right. And so I was writing that book, which, if you remember, is set before, during, and after the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. And so I'm looking at all these archived photographs, and I came across one of the San Francisco. It was 1915, and San Francisco had hosted the World's Fair. And so 18 million people came to see this phoenix that had risen from the ashes, because it was only 9 years after that devastating earthquake and fire. So here's this picture of the 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco, in this beautiful exhibition building that they built on top of landfill that had been the ruin of their city. And there's this booth in there, and it's the Race Betterment booth. And I remember looking at those words, and I stumbled over them. Race betterment. What is that? What does that even mean? And then in small letters, it was the eugenics booth. And I had only the vaguest definition in my mind of what eugenics was. I knew that, genic is genes, and that prefix EU means good. Like a eulogy is good words about this person who has just died. And so eugenics means good genes. And that's all I knew. And I thought, why are they at the World's Fair talking about race betterment? And I said, for a moment, I thought that's exactly what Hitler was doing in the 1930s and 40s. And so I thought, I'm going to have to come back to that. And so I finished the book, The Nature of Fragile Things. And then I did do a deep dive into the eugenic movement. And I was just surprised and appalled and astonished by the impact that it had on the early part of the 20th century. And I felt like it was a movement that had faded from modern memory, which is okay. It's a bad idea, except that when we forget our past, well, you know how it is. If you don't remember the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And I thought, gosh, it would be sad if we let this movement go by the wayside such that no one remembers it at all. I thought, if I write a novel, it'll bring it back up to the forefront, at least for, however many readers pick up this book. And I do think the eugenic movement needs to be remembered, even though it was as terrible as I wrote. I didn't really make up anything except the characters' names. I think we need to remember it so that we don't go right back into that kind of thinking. It's too easy.
Did you tour that facility? Did you get a chance to go in and talk to or is it still open, or?
Yeah, when I drove into it, you could still go on to the campus. I wonder now if they blocked off the whole thing, but you could still drive onto the campus. But the building itself, I used to have a picture here. It's no longer in use. And so this building is the Sonoma State Home. And so it's right outside of Santa Rosa. And it was, up until I think the early 2000s, it was a developmental center for adults with disabilities. And I think in its last life, it had a good purpose. But it closed down, insufficient funds and a whole bunch of other things. So it's no longer in operation, but the building is still there. And when it was operational in the 1920s, 1910s, they sterilized more people without their consent or knowledge than any other facility in California. In fact, California sterilized more people than any other state, exponentially more.
Wow.
Which is why I set the book in that area, not just because California is my home state, but because of the statistics of the Sonoma State Home, which is why I set the story in Sonoma County. I didn't want to use that hospital, that very hospital, as a setting because I wanted to control everything about it, especially Dr. Townsend, and especially how those girls try to escape. And I patterned it after that. So if you're from the area, I've had people email me and say, I live right by that place. And so they know which one I'm talking about, but I never name it as that. And that's why I picked that place and California wine country for all of those reasons.
Interestingly, in the book that's coming out, that's coming out in October, it was referred to as at the time, the Western State Lunatic Asylum in Stanton. And I know, and it's closed now, but it up until about the mid 1870s, it served as a place of wellness and enlightenment for the insane and the infirm. But then after that, in the that same time period, 1905, 1910, it switched into eugenics, a whole different, purpose. And interestingly, the building looks, part of the brick, it looks very similar to what you just
Yeah.
So I thought that was this kind of cool observation on that. So with that, so you had that, you stumbled across this photograph and you stumbled across this and sort of came up with this concept of, a story about eugenics, but you also weave a number of other things in there. I thought there's a lot going on, and I think well done, tied together. But we have two protagonists, and so before we get too far in there, you guys love my polls, right? You guys have been complaining I haven't done them for a while, so I did a poll, and so I just got to find it. Where is it? Oh, when we have okay, it's down here at the bottom somewhere. I know it is. Oh, no, wrong one. Hold on, I'm really bad at this computer. Hold on. But my question is going to be, here it is. It's going to be there's two protagonists in here, in this book, right? One is Rose and the other one is Helen. And so my question for all of you is, which protagonist did you find most relatable? And just go ahead. Is it launched? Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So is it Rosie? Is it Helen? Were you drawn to both equally, or you really weren't drawn to either character? Just to get a sense of where you guys came in. Wow, it's always fun to watch these. Susan, can you see what's going on, or you can't?
I can't see. I don't think I see the result.
Okay, I will once it's whenever okay. I can't end it. When I end it, it'll show on the screen.
Okay.
So I've got 20. I can't vote.
I'll do one
so
too.
Of 26 of you guys have played. Come on, everybody. And Susan, you're not allowed to play. Can't vote on your own people. All right. 24 out of 20, 25, 26. Oh, I got somebody coming into the play with us. There we go. It's Wendy coming in. All right. Does everybody get a chance? Anybody still on the fence as to what to do? All right. I'm going to end the poll. Here we go. I am shocked. Okay. Can you guys see?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, Susan,
Wow.
about half your audience, 42%, were excited about both characters. But Helen comes out a little stronger than Rosie on the individual side. And someone didn't particularly care for either one. So interesting. Do you guys need to see more of that? You good? So someone who really felt that Rosie was the character for you, give us some thoughts on why you preferred her character over Helen's. Anybody? Who's a Rosie person? Betsy? Is that you? No, did you wave your hand? Who raised their hand? Come on. All right, I will then, because I think Rosie was more my kind of gal, honestly. And I felt, from my perspective, she was the most sympathetic character in the book. I felt really horrible for her. 17 years old, being put in just a horrible situation by the owner of the woman Celine at the vineyard, at the by her husband, by the county worker, all around. This child couldn't get a break, and so. To me, I felt that she was much more sympathetic, and I could relate to her a little more. Miriam?
Yeah, I was a Rosie person too. I guess having read a number of books kind of with that theme. I found that I felt for her. I felt more emotionally engaged with what was going on with Rosie. I really felt like she was getting the bad end of the stick, which obviously she was. And she was never given the opportunity to say, like, it kind of wasn't my fault. This just kind of happened. I felt like she was really, really taking advantage of it. And the very first time I thought she was taking advantage of is in the very beginning, right? Where her parents die. And the woman that her family's been working for forever says, well, I'll let you in the house, but I'll pay you less and I'll teach you how to do this thing. And you're going to be basically my servant, my slave. And I found that very jarring. And then kind of all through the book. I really liked your book, by the way. I couldn't stop crying at the end.
I know, right?
Really, really liked your book. It's very powerful. I do have some other comments for later, but I'll shut up.
So, do I have a Helen person that could speak up in terms of why you were more drawn to Helen than you were perhaps Rosie? Anyone? Got to toggle between screens? I'm going to call on somebody. You're not going to like it. No one's going to come on. You guys are shy tonight. Come on. Susan won't bite you, I promise.
I won't. You can say whatever you want.
They're not being cooperative tonight. No one, most of you, a lot of you voted for Helen over Rosie, and no thoughts there. Miriam, you gonna go again?
I'll just keep talking because I couldn't really decide. So
Okay.
Helen was a very interesting character too. I thought that her perspective, her point of view of what was happening in Germany was really, really interesting. And for me being Jewish, I thought the most interesting piece was she wasn't, right? But she got really involved with all of what was going on, and she really wanted to help. She really, felt it was wrong. And then as she goes on, she wants to really help. And I found that she was a very brave character. I would have liked to have known more about her herself. But I liked the fact that not only did she champion the handicap, but afterwards she really wanted to make sure this never happened again. And I love the fact of how she was really appalled of what was happening in the United States and how this was so clearly what the Nazis were doing as well. So I guess I was a both, but Rosie resonated with me.
In terms of tenacity, I mean, that's what I saw her character. Very, very, tenacious when it came to that sort of thing. Lisa, yes, and then I'll come back to this point.
I loved Helen so much because she was just so gentle. She just the way she dealt with everybody, she kind of loved everybody. And I know she was hurt terribly, but I just love the way she spoke to Rosie and she spoke to everybody that she came in contact with. She was just so gentle and full of love. It just amazed me. I loved her character.
Thank you.
Susan, did you have someone in mind, a real person at all, or a story about people who were rescuing the disabled and smuggling them into Switzerland when you wrote that character?
Yeah, I didn't find anybody in my research who did what Helen did. I have to believe that maybe there were people, a handful, 1, 2, who were trying to get these children out of Nazi occupied Europe. I never found one. So that means either they did not write down their experiences or they've been written down, but they've been lost to antiquity, as some smaller stories go. It's been quite a while. So I don't have a person in mind when I constructed her character and what she did. I kind of gave Helen some of the things that I would have done. Like if I had been there, what would I have done? Because it would have driven me mad watching children being taken like that. And I would have been like her, I think. I would not have been able to sit still. And so, because I couldn't find any real person, I kind of had to make it up and hope that I came up with something that was rational and slightly possible, if not plausible, that they could have done this by taking them across that footbridge into Switzerland. But I kind of wanted Helen to be the every person who wishes they could have done something. You know, for those of us who look back on that time and wished there had been more people who had done the brave thing and done more. And hopefully that's why maybe Helen resonates with you, is that she's us. For me, she's us. It's just, if we had been there, if we had had any kind of opportunity at all to do something, you know, would we have done it? Would we have taken that brave step?
I like the fact that you made her 62 years old, just saying.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know who Zoom user is, and I apologize because there's no name up. So Zoom user.
I don't know why my name is not coming up, but it's Kristen Rock. Hi.
Hi, Kristen. How are you? Yeah, usually you have your name up. I
Hey.
see you.
Yeah, usually I do, but I'm on my phone today.
That's fine.
So I thought the biggest difference between those two characters was really that Helen was such a doer. Like you said, she saw a problem and she was like, I will fix this. And she was tenacious to the point that, I was like, yes, girl, go. Yes, go and find more. Yes, go back. I really appreciated that about her. But I felt like it was in contrast to Rosie, who was just like, oh my gosh, things just happen.
Mhm.
And that was a very interesting play between those two characters in the book.
That's a very interesting observation. You're right. I hadn't really thought about it before, but you're absolutely right. With Rosie, she was always going to be the victim in this story. And I did not pattern her after a real person either, except for Carrie Buck, who is this person here. And Carrie's a real person. What happened to Rosie was pretty much what happened to her. She was in a foster home situation, was sexually assaulted by a family member, wound up pregnant, was sent to a home like the Sonoma State Home. This was in Virginia. Had the baby. That baby was taken from her. She was sterilized. And
it wasn't in Stanton, Virginia, was it?
It was that. What was that?
Was it in Stanton, Virginia?
I cannot remember now the place. If you remember it being that, it probably is. I cannot quite recall where.
It might have been. Yeah, that's the same place.
Yeah,
Western State Lunatic Asylum.
Yes, and they wanted to have her. I think what the states wanted, especially Virginia, was they wanted to make sure they were not denying anybody their constitutional rights with this, and so they wanted her case to be appealed at every level so that it would be heard by the Supreme Court, and that's exactly what happened. And so the conversation that Helen has with George and Lila in the living room on Christmas night is pretty much exactly what happened. Her case did go to the Supreme Court, and it was ruled 8-1 that she should be sterilized. And the ruling was Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he said, we have to stop this flood of imbeciles. And the thing about it was they weren't given all the information. The justices weren't given all the information. She wasn't an imbecile. If they had been shown her school records, they would have seen she had average intelligence. She was no genius, but she was not an imbecile either. She was not feeble-minded. And Carrie's story is so sad, I couldn't tell it. I had to tell something like it and have it be Rosie, but have there be something good that happens at the end. And you mentioned that, Sharon, that you had to wait for that good ending, but I was going to give it to you because I wanted her to come out on the end after 400 pages being reunited with her daughter and having had a good life in the interim, so that she was not like Carrie. Carrie never had another child, obviously, and that little girl that she did have died in the care of the same foster family whose nephew raped her. And so it's just sad all the way around. And I wanted Rosie's story to end on a note that was more life affirming and made you feel good about the world we live in, and that there are good people still in it. And we have to maybe sometimes look for the good, but it's there.
Teresa.
Hello, Susan. It's so nice to have you back here, and I loved your book. I was not aware of the sterilizations that happened in California, but I've done a lot of reading and genealogy about women being forced to give up their babies, and I was one of the people who I related to Rosie and Helen equally. Rosie, because I myself was a very young mom, and I've been very lucky. My husband and I have been together for like 46 years, I think, this November. And, was lucky I didn't have to make a decision like that, or nobody made it for me. And, I have 3 kids now, but anyway, I liked Rosie. She was able to, in her heart, resolve that this is best for my child, which I feel like any good parent would do, regardless of your age. If you're a parent, your child, you want the best for them, and even at the cost of what it cost her. So it was really nice when she was able to reunite with her daughter. And then Helen worked for many years in special ed, and just to see how some of the most wonderful teachers I worked with, they would shy away from students with differences. They just couldn't relate. We had when my younger daughter was in preschool, there was a little boy who was on the spectrum of autism, and he loved my daughter. She was really outgoing, loved her. And the mom said, could she please stay after and play with him? It's good for his socialization. And I asked Bridget, and she said, sure, she would love to. And one of my friends said to me, well, I don't see any benefit to Bridget in doing that. And I said, well, guess what? It benefits him, and she wants to do. I just thought that was like, I didn't really like her much after that. I thought it was so just mean. But I liked Helen because she saw through everybody's differences and just had a good, kind, and loving heart. And I just think it'd be nice if there would be more people like that. So she was wonderful too.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
Jean?
Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
You mentioned earlier that you really struggled at the beginning of the pandemic because of the loneliness. And do you think your own sense of loneliness kind of supported Rosie and Helen in their journeys through all of the things they were going through? Do you think you would have written the same depth of character if we hadn't had the pandemic?
That's such a good question. I wonder sometimes too, because it definitely had an influence on me, I think. And I think for me, I didn't deal with loneliness as much as I dealt with doubt and uncertainty. Like, we didn't know. I was safe at home. I was already working from home, so my life didn't change that drastically. I was already a stay-at-home writer, if you will, an empty nester. Our kids were grown and flown. And my husband, he worked at home too. And we had everything we needed, really. We had each other. We were able to work at home and be friends about it. We actually enjoyed working together in our different rooms and meeting for tea in the morning at 10 a.m. and coffee in the afternoon at 3. So that part was okay, but it was just the headlines and watching the news in the morning and then seeing how this disease was having such a traumatic effect. I think that part was the uncertainty and the fear of the unknown, which definitely, that's in this book too. So I think if anything bled over into the pages, it was probably just that feeling of, I don't know what's happening and it scares me.
I think that was one of the things that came out most strongly for me with both of those characters. They each had this incredible sense of unknown. And for Rosie, part of it was her age. Part of it was the fact that she had the people she thought she didn't end up having. She had no connection to anyone. So she truly was alone. And Helen, there was something about Helen that I kept thinking there was a backstory that I needed to know about her life. Looking at some of the decisions she'd made and leaving home and just kind of venturing into this unknown world and then choosing to stay as someone who could have left. Was it altruism that she truly thought she could do something? Or was there some mea culpa that she felt she owed to people because of something in her own life? There was a backstory there that I kept thinking, I need to know more about her.
Yeah, I think there were some things I wanted to write about Helen, but the book was getting long and it didn't really, other than I probably should have at least alluded to it so that it would have been there, but her sense of wanderlust, she just wanted to see the world. And coupled with her desire to teach.
Mhm.
And so she found this great marriage of those two things with being an expat who was also a nanny. And then I think too, I can't remember now how much of what I wrote about her and her dad made it into the last edit of the book, but dad wanted her to be, I have a real job, being a nanny, that is not a real job. That's just somebody's babysitter. And so part of that too might have just been her own desire to exert her independence over that, was choosing to stay. She loved Europe too. There's that. And we had I lived in Europe for 5 years when my husband was active duty Air Force, and we loved it there. We kind of came home kicking and screaming. And so part of her desire to be part of that world might have come from me too, because I never lived in Vienna, but we lived in Germany for 1.5 years. We lived in England for 3 years, and they were magical years. They really were.
Thank you.
Carol, you had your hand up, then down, up. You have a comment? Are you're good?
Yes, me. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, okay. I guess not. Okay, great. So a couple things. I just want to bring up the symbolism of the amaryllis. I mean, it was lovely and well done, and it didn't, I'm sure everyone else picked up on that. Do you want to go into, sort of how you got that idea, or, what your, I always hate to try to interpret what I think you meant in terms of how you were placing that, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that beautiful
No, that's a good
symbolism.
question too. Yeah, I wanted there to be some sort of motif that was in the book that showed up a lot, that was beautiful, because so much about what the book entailed was hard and difficult and sad. So I did want there to be something beautiful, and I was imagining flowers on the cover, and I thought, well, what flowers should those be? Like what kind of flower should I use? Because I knew I was going to be using it as a metaphor, and when I decide to put a metaphor in a book, I look for all kinds of ways to kind of to use it, abuse it, and exploit it. And I thought, bulb flowers hide all their beauty, and you can look at a bulb, and if it's been in the dirt and been dug up, it does look like a dirty old turnip, and it doesn't speak of its beauty to you. You have to plant it, and then in the spring, of course, you get this beautiful flower. And all bulb flowers are like that, tulip and hyacinth and daffodils, amaryllis. But the thing about amaryllis was it made for a pretty name, and I knew I could have that name be the name of the little girl. And also they can bloom in the winter. They're forced to bloom in the winter, but they are put into a situation where it feels like spring. And so they bloom. And so you have this beauty in the midst of a cold, bleak winter. And the flower doesn't care what season it is. It's nurtured. And when it's nurtured, it blooms beautifully. And I thought, well, I can use that in all kinds of ways. A lot of people don't look beautiful on the outside in terms of what we would say is beautiful, but all of their worth and inner beauty is right there. And we just have to have better eyes to see it. And I think that's the eugenic way of looking at something is, are you beautiful? If you are, we want more of you. If you're not only do we not like you, we don't want any more like you at all. And that's pretty much what eugenic thinking is. It's deciding what is perfect and then acting on it as if the people in charge were God. And so not only were they deciding what is perfect and what's not, they were actually making decisions about who would be able to perpetuate and who would not, which is exactly what Hitler was doing with his master race in Nazi-occupied Europe. So eugenic thinking, if you take it to its zenith, we've seen it. It happened in Nazi-occupied Europe.
Well, and I think there's some thoughts that maybe it happens still today. We have a lot of discussion over, parents' involvement in their kids, all kinds of stuff. And where does the government step in, and what's the government's role? If you look back, you've got the government telling, Rosie, she's not capable of taking care of this child. She shouldn't have this child, and taking children away. And then you've got in your state, some threats. Governor Newsom vetoed it, but hey, if you disagree with what your kid, it's almost the opposite if you think about it. But again, interference or parents, the government stepping into the role when maybe they don't have that right to it. I think that, that kind of hit me a little hard, with this, there's a lot of this discussion and going on in our culture today, and it's a different look at it, but again, I think that, the government can overstep. And I think that's what you were trying to say, that, that the zenith was indeed Nazi Germany and what they were doing to children and all other folks, and just the wrongness of it, I've got somebody coming in. Hold on, I'm a latecomer. Great. So I'm going to open it up to y'all. I am going to ask you about the cover, but because I thought it was one of the prettiest covers I've seen. You guys, isn't it beautiful? If you didn't do the e-reader, you didn't get a chance to look at I love red. It's my favorite color, obviously, and the amaryllis on it. The children on the cover. I mean, I was a little okay. Sometimes there's representative of children, but those are little boys. Can you give us a thoughts on who these people are supposed to be on the cover? Or are they just random people that just sort of gives you a sense of the family unit?
Yeah, they're representative. It's in an ideal world, mothers should be able to dance in a field with their children, and nobody should be looking at them and deciding which of them should have had those children and which shouldn't. So it is sort of representative of mothers and children, and the way things would be in a perfect world where you could just dance in the sun like that, and you wouldn't have to worry about either not have had the chance to have that child, or to have that child taken from you. So the photograph my publisher found, the art department, but I sent them one very similar to that I found. I was looking on a site one day, and I said, because the cover kind of came about by my saying, I want there to be flowers on it, and I want there to be like mothers and children somehow, but I also want it to look like something is wrong. Because only the beautiful, that should tell you something. There's a qualifier there, and it's not good to say only the beautiful. That means that there's a distinction being made based on like looks or outside things. And so Colleen Reinhardt is the designer of the cover, and she put those thoughts together and came with a beautiful amaryllis border, those mothers and their children dancing in the field like that, and then the tobacco sky, which to me was kind of like letting you know that this is the beautiful cover, but there's something off about those words, only the beautiful, which is why I loved it so much.
I loved it too. That was beautiful. I'm sure they went out and they did all the polls with all the people, and you got votes and picked it. But was there another one that was in the running, or this was it?
Sometimes they do show me, yeah, we're looking at these 4 or 5, but this one, they said, this is the one we love. Do you know, what do you think? And my editor told me she cried when she saw it. So I think they knew, and we all knew from the get-go that it was the one. I never saw any other iteration.
Good for you. Good. All right. Yeah. I'm opening up to all y'all, that's a Southern term. All y'all's, to ask some questions. And so with that, who's going to run first? You guys are quiet. Carol, yes, ma'am.
Hi. One of the reasons why I didn't speak a lot before was because I'm an extremely slow reader, and I finally got the book out of the library, and then they kept bugging me after 7 days to return it. So I promised to finish it. I got about halfway through, but I want to just say that I love your writing, and I love the nature of fragile thing, but Fall of Marigolds, like every September 11th, I always think about your book. And I just love the way you develop characters and how they really jump off the page. And I felt like that with Rosie a lot.
Thank you. It's a lot to me.
And so, but I wanted to ask, what about the title? Did I miss anything, or how did you decide on the title?
The title, sometimes I have to spend the writing of the whole book to come up with a title that I like. And sometimes the title emerges out of the actual words inside the book. And the one I'm writing right now doesn't even have a title. And I've already finished writing it, the first draft, and I still don't have a title that I like. This one, these 3 words came together that way rather quickly. And I'm not sure why, and I don't recall the exact day, but usually when I'm noodling on titles is I'll have like a yellow legal pad and a pencil, and I just start writing, keywords and seeing how they play together. And I knew that the theme of this book was the eugenic movement, which is all about deciding who has value and who does not.
It was beautiful. Right.
And so that doesn't sound like a good title, but Only the Beautiful, which is pretty much the same thing, I think has the kind of lyric quality you want to have in a title. And so I wrote that down, and I never wrote another title. I remember thinking when I turned it in, I hope they like this title, because I don't have a title sheet for this one. This is the only thing I have.
I think it's a great thing, because like even the term beautiful could be defined in so many ways, and
Right.
context of this particular story.
Right.
And can I ask, do you write on a yellow pad? Are you like a pen and yellow pad writer, or?
I only write on a yellow pad if I don't have my laptop with me.
Oh, okay.
Which every now and then I might travel without it. But most of the time I'm writing on a laptop. I'm very grateful for the technology we have that lets me edit on the page, because I can spend lots of time reworking a page, and I don't have to have all kinds of smashed up paper in the wastebasket. Yeah.
I'm a yellow pad and pen person, but I sometimes talk it into my phone.
Yeah, I do that too sometimes. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank
Cheryl.
you.
Miriam?
I told you I would have more. Okay, so here's my, I guess my shocker was part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to ask you, because I found that a very abrupt ending. It's like all of a sudden the book ended, and then you started with another, almost like another whole book. And I'm wondering, is that because now that I've learned that you had so many versions, if that was on purpose, that you don't have really any interaction between the two characters, or much interaction between the two characters, or why it's this abrupt shift from one place to the other?
Yeah, I had different ideas for constructing this novel, and I tried a few out. One of them was alternating chapters, and I just didn't like it. It was so ordinary. That's how so many books are. I've written books like that.
Right.
That's the book I'm writing right now, is alternating chapters. So I know it works, but I just wanted something different for this one, because the subject matter was so different, and the subject matter is jarring. It really is. And so I thought I'm going to tell Rosie's story, and there's a little bit of closure there because she meets the doctor. And I'm pretty sure people get the idea that they probably have a future together. He's newly widowed. His sons don't have a mother. He gets her. He understands what she's gone through. And so I left enough that it didn't seem hallmarky, but enough that it seemed there's a possibility that man might bring her happiness in more ways than just medically. So then I shut the door, and I knew it would be abrupt, and I was hoping it would work. I've had a few people write to me and say they didn't like that way, and all I can say is, I'm sorry, I did it on purpose. and hopefully what it did was, as you read Helen's story, it just made you ache to know what happened to Rosie and her daughter. And then of course it gave me such great momentum for the end of the book, with Helen and with Rosie coming to the book signing, and all of that was just that part for me was very satisfying. And it's the part people tell me that they cry about. And I think sometimes when I cry at a book or in a book, it's because I'm so emotionally invested. These people feel real to me. And I don't know if I would have gotten that same kind of gravitas if I had just had alternating chapters. So I don't think I may do it again. I don't know. But for this book, it just seemed like it was the way to go.
I mean, I did see the alternating chapters where you have Helen telling her story in segments, and a little bit from Rosie's point of view. I don't want to spoil the whole thing for Carol. But I thought that once I got over that abruptness, and I could see how you could have kept reaching back to provide some kind of a little bit of a backstory in there to connect Helen to part one.
Right.
I
Right.
did have one comment I was going to make. When I started reading this book and it was about eugenics, I kept thinking, this is what Jodi Picoult would write about.
Yeah, you're right.
And I could see her writing a book on this topic. And so I guess I'm also going to praise you that this is the kind of story that I see her writing, and I see how sensitively you handled this story, and I'm very impressed. It was I also have to tell you, I read this during Yom Kippur, which was an incredibly, it's an incredibly powerful day. And I read this that night and in the afternoon between services. And it was just, I guess it was the perfect book for it, but it was such a powerful book that it really, I don't know. It just wrapped me up emotionally in what was really happening, and I couldn't put the book down. And I didn't want to go back until I finished reading your book. I didn't want to go back to what the other stuff I was supposed to be doing. So
She gets paid to read these things, so there's that. Not by me.
and I do review, but
Right.
I picked this up knowing we were going to have to read it, for this week, and it was the right book this year for that mood, for that day. So I guess that was my other comment, that it really added a lot to the day, a lot of introspection for my day. So
To
thank you
dovetail
for
onto
really
that,
making
Miriam,
that.
I will tell you, I read it in one sitting. I
Mhm.
sat down with it at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was done by 11:30 midnight. I read, sorry, Carol, I read pretty fast, but I could not put it down. Ask my husband. I didn't even watch the news. I'm like, I'm busy. Leave me alone. I got my book. Because it was like you said, Miriam, unbelievably powerful. And I found myself crying at the Amaryllis stories. Whenever she came in at that orphanage, by the way, I knew it. I just knew it when Helen shows up. I knew that girl was there. I just knew it. It had to be. Because who's going to adopt a kid who's, in that time, whose mother was in a quote a loony bin, when she was born. It's not going to happen, right? So I just kind of knew that. And the other thing on the chapters, just want to comment there. I like that a lot. The alternating back and forth, I feel like it's just another way of head hopping. It just, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it takes me a bit to sort of shift gears. This way I got all of it. And then just like in real life, this girl, Rosie, sort of starts her new life and disappears. I think it's what she wanted. And so you represented that in just that structure. I think that was extremely well done. I wish there was more of that. Don't give up on this thought. I liked it a lot. I think it, like you said, it fit this book really, really well. It made the story very powerful. And then you got to see Rosie's story through someone else's eyes.
Right. Yeah.
And you did a great job of not being too repetitive. That's the risk you run, repeating what the reader's already read, and then they get frustrated, and
I already know this. Yeah.
And your editor yells at you, which happens a lot. Anything else? Anybody else want to jump in? Yes, Denise.
Well, I just want to say I loved your book. And you know what? I love it when an author writes so that I'm emotionally involved. Yes, I had tears. I liked the separation of Rosie and Helen, and then bringing them together at the end. What I really loved, I think, was the whole symbolism of the amaryllis. I could see that through the story, like you said, on the cover. I especially like page 119. I just think the use of that is so beautiful and speaks to your title, and what was going on. I like knowing I did not know much about what was going on in the United States. A little bit about there was some eugenics in the city that I live in now, back then in an insane asylum.
Mm.
And I learned a little bit about that. But this, yeah, page 119, beauty out of nothingness, hope out of darkness.
Mm.
She gave birth to this beautiful child. And then, wished that she would, be without her defect. So,
Mm.
yeah, I love that whole Amaryllis stuff.
Thanks.
So thank you for bringing such a beautiful book into the world, because yeah, I can't say anything bad about it. And
Thank you.
yeah, just very emotionally attached. So thank you for writing something that was able to do that for me.
Oh, thank
So
you.
that's it.
Thanks,
I
Denise, so
appreciate it.
much. Thank you, thank you. All right, anybody else? Because we're getting near the hour, top of the hour, which we'll let everybody go. Any
What
other
are you
comments?
writing next? What are we going to read next?
Okay, I have you on.
Yeah.
No,
Let
no,
me-
no. What's Susan writing next? I know
Oh,
you're
oh,
going to.
yeah. Oh, what Susan? I was gonna say yes. What's Susan writing next? That's on my list. Susan's next, and
Yeah.
before we go there, she's got a children's book coming out, right?
I do. Yeah. It's,
Yeah. So let's talk about that, and then what she's writing next. Sorry, Miriam, I almost cut her off.
okay. I wrote something where nobody dies. You don't need tissues. There's nothing sad about it. It's called Pumpkin Day at the Zoo. It's a picture book, and the illustrations are adorable. And it's about that day in October when zoos give their animals pumpkins in their habitats, and they play with them and eat them and roll them around. It's a great day. The animals look forward to it. The zookeepers look forward to it, and the patrons. It's just a win-win-win. It's a really
Aw.
fun book to write. And yeah, the best part is just it's all fun. There are no tissues required. So
Except the
yeah.
fact that we're losing all of our pandas. San Diego Zoo is
That is
losing
sad.
there. I
Yeah.
know, and we're losing ours in Washington. Very sad.
Yeah, we lost ours in San Diego. It's just I'm grateful for the time we had them, that's for sure. But it sure would be nice to be able to loan them to each other again. That was wonderful. Yeah.
And so what are you writing now?
With the book I'm writing now that doesn't have a title, I'm also having trouble explaining what it's about. I need to work on getting it, being able
You haven't got
to.
your elevator pitch yet. Okay.
Yes, but I'm going to find a different word because this word is not handy. It's clunky, but it's a book about displacement. And people can be physically displaced from home, as so many Eastern Europeans were after the war. They really were. It was a pronoun, displaced person, capital D, capital P. And if you were in a DP camp and could not go home to where you used to be, either because there was no home anymore, or because it was now an Eastern Bloc country and you didn't want to be ruled under communism, you were a refugee and you had to wait to see if anybody would take you. You became the expat. And so it's a character. There's a character who is a DP who comes to California from Eastern Europe. She's the real deal. She's displaced. She's a displaced person. But there's two other people in the book too who are also facing displacement. And what displacement is when you are taken out of everything that's familiar to you, everything that feels like home and secure, safe haven, and it's gone. And so the other two characters, their displacement's not quite as overt as hers, but they're both in danger of losing their homes, their livelihoods, and their lives collide in the most beautiful places. It's Malibu, like the most unlikely places where you have three women facing displacement whose lives collide. And so in this beautiful backdrop, they're having to wrestle with, where am I going to go if I lose my home? Or how am I going to get back what I lost? So that is what the book is about. I'm trying to find a way to explain that better. I'm working on it, not quite there yet.
That's okay. When do you expect to have it? When do you think it's going to be published? Do you have a date yet?
It's going to be early 2025, only because Only the Beautiful comes out in paperback in like March, and they want the paperback to have some time in the sun too, all by itself. And so it'll follow that probably early 2025.
Got it. Perfect. All right, everybody want to give her a little hand? Yes, a big hand, not a little hand.
Thanks so much for having me again, reading one of my books again, and for all your lovely comments. It's always nice to chat with all of you. You guys ask really good questions.
Folks, go on to Goodreads. Also, if you bought your book from Amazon, give it a review. Even if you don't feel like writing up what you feel, just at least give it, the star rating. So we all need as many of those as we can get to offset the crazy person here or there that gives you a 1. But it was a lovely book, and so please feel free to give Susan a review. And thank you again, Susan, for joining us. And we will be seeing you, I know, in the future.
Thank you for coming.
Gotcha. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oops, I did the wrong video. Hold on. Hold on.